This is Demi Lovato's new album cover, but did you know that Demi Lovato was once a professed Christian who traveled to Israel to get baptized in the same river as Jesus, and even had a member of her church prophesy her success at just 11 years old.
The lady who was speaking in tongues, she pointed at me and said, "Come here." And I just walked up and she put her hand on my head and she started saying, "God says, you will be a hero to thousands of people one day, and it'll be using some form of art."
Wow.
And she said, "Are you ready?" And of course, me being at like 11 years old, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go paint a picture. What can I do?
So how did she go from a Christian with a calling from God to now a soldier for the kingdom of darkness? Well, it's much deeper than you think. So this is a really heartbreaking story, mainly because I can only imagine the amount of people who have gone through similar experiences to the ones that we're about to break down in this video. The same experiences that happened to Demi Lovato that ultimately forced her away from her relationship with Jesus and into the hand of Satan. And no, I'm not saying just because you have negative experiences in church or negative experiences with your pastor or people in your church, I'm not saying that that should be your justification to turn your back on Jesus and start following the ways of this world. But unfortunately, that is exactly what happens to so many baby Christians who simply just lack the faith and discernment and understanding to know better. So I want you to take a very close listen to this clip. And this is Demi describing her experience early on in church when she was just 11 years old. It's super interesting. Take a listen to it, all right?
I don't believe in irony or coincidence. I feel like everything happens for a reason the way it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there was actually a long time ago, I was at a church convention when I was 11 years old, and they started speaking in tongue, and I was like, what is this? So I was like freaked out, but like interested at the same time. And the lady who was speaking in tongue, she pointed at me and said, "Come here." And I just walked up and she put her hand on my head and she started saying, "God says, you will be a hero to thousands of people one day, and it'll be using some form of art."
Wow.
And she said, "Are you ready?" And of course, me being at like 11 years old, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go paint a picture. What can I do?
All right, so let this be a lesson that if you don't use the gifts that God has given you for the kingdom, you could quickly fall into the wicked ways of this world. And if your heart is not aligned with the things of God, you may receive a blessing, quote unquote, but then it will ruin your entire life. And that's exactly what we saw happen to Demi, because she was set up and given these gifts in order to glorify the kingdom. Just imagine how many people she could have brought to Christ through the gift of music that she had. But instead of aligning her heart with God, she aligned it with the world, and look what the world gave her. And I want to show you another clip. This is another interesting clip where Demi is talking about a promise that she made to God. And the irony of this clip is crazy. Just take a listen.
It sounds ridiculous, but like I kind of made a pact with God. And I don't think you're even supposed to do that, but I was like, I promise if you make me a singer, one day I'm going to use my voice for so much more than singing, and I'm going to help people with it.
And you've held up your end of the bargain.
I've held up my end of the bargain. I still do.
And God's held up his.
And God held up his. He was like, you don't realize what you're asking for, but here you go.
All right, so jumping to today, look at how far Demi's faith has dwindled over the years. In this interview that she just did, August of 2022 with Apple Music, and promotion for her new album, of which I'm not going to say the name, she gets asked a very interesting question about the current state of her religion and the current state of her faith. And I want you to take a close listen to what she says, because she takes a very strong stance. Check it out.
My faith is, my spirituality is based in energy. I was raised Christian, and I went to this big fancy mega church and saw a lot of things that I didn't like, felt outcasted, and when I moved to California, kept going to church, but then kept hearing things that were not okay because I was figuring myself out. And I'm like, how are you going to tell me who I should and should not love?
Yeah.
And be attracted to?
Yeah.
And
that's where it falls apart, because the principle of religion is actually a beautiful thing. It's community driven. The idea is to find solace and to find comfort in the arms of others and not just yourself, to help you through tough times.
Yeah.
The problem is then the framework gets more and more rigid because it appeals to money.
Right.
And business.
Right.
And it just pushes people with big hearts out of the room.
Yeah. And when I found out that the owner of the church or the pastor of the church bought a $20 million plane with the church's money.
There it is.
After I was saving up my money for offerings. I was like, I'm out of here.
I'm sorry, you're a
Yeah.
You do that shit, you're a dick.
Yeah. I've had like this kind of burned view.
You're out.
And there's other things too that I'm not mentioning, but there, this album there's a song on this album called Heaven, which is actually about a Bible verse.
It's a good one.
So this Bible verse is Matthew 5:30. It says, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It's better to lose one part of your body than your entire body to hell. And it's about masturbation.
Right.
And so I was like, I was told at a very young age, which I should not have been told that Bible verse. I was told that in church, and I remember thinking like, oh my God, like I can never do this. That's so shameful.
Who wakes up
and decides to tell a kid that?
Who goes, today's the day. Big life lesson coming up.
I don't remember exactly what age I was, but it was too young and not old enough to be discussing that topic. But anyways, I heard that. I feared. I lived in fear. And then as I got older, I felt so much shame around my sexuality because of the church that I was raised in. And so when I was taking the power back of my anger, I was thinking of all the things that have suppressed me in my life, whether it be relationships, whether it be people of my past team, or whether it be the church. I wanted to take my power back, and I was like, I have my own sex toy. Like, I'm not ashamed of this anymore. So I was like, F it, I'm going to write a song about this Bible verse, and it's going to be called Heaven, because I'm going to hell because it feels like heaven.
And there's the line. You get one for that. It's a great...
All right, so there's a lot to unpack here, but let's just start on the first piece of information that she was talking about, which was this idea of judgment. Because I feel like this has been something that has been plaguing the church for a very long time. And this idea of feeling like you're judged and feeling like you can't be who you are, and just feeling like, religious people are against you. This has been an idea that has caused a lot of people to fall away from the faith. And Demi is attributing this as one of the core ideas as to why she fell away from the faith. And she even mentioned Matthew 5 verse 30. Matthew 5 verse 30, it says, and if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And Demi uses this verse, and she says that this is about strictly masturbation, which is not true. This verse is not only about masturbation, but this verse is specifically about just sin in general, and whatever sin that you are convicted of by God, because God will do things. He'll convict you of certain things, and he'll let you know that, certain sins that you're doing are not right. And he'll prompt you, and he'll put it on your heart to change these things. And when God makes this prompt, you can go one of two directions. You can go in the direction of pride and saying that, hey, this is me. This is who I am. I know best. Or you can go in the direction of submitting to God and allowing God to work through you, because ultimately he knows what's best for you. And what God is trying to say is like, yo, hell is so bad that it is not worth you continuing to fall into that sin and having that sin cause you to fall away from the faith and go to hell, because it would be best if you just cut off that hand, stop that sin completely, dealt with that pain, that temporary suffering of cutting off that sin. It'd be better if you did that than if you went to hell, because hell is so bad it doesn't even compare to the sin that you're playing with. So that's the first thing. But also we have to understand that judgment in the church is not always the same as judgment in the world. Because oftentimes what could happen is when church people judge you, quote unquote, maybe it's because they can see something in you, something godly in you, something that God is calling you to do. Maybe they can see your calling in you that you can't see in that very moment. And they're calling that out. And they're calling you to be better. They're calling you to live to the standard that God has called you, because they can see your calling before you can even see it, because the devil has you blind to it. But in your head, it might look like, oh, everyone's judging me. Everyone's judging me. But in actuality, they're trying to point you towards a direction of righteousness, towards the light and not towards darkness. And the next thing that she said about how the pastor got like a $20 million jet, and that was like the last straw. This is actually a very good point as well, because I feel like a lot of people, new Christians, old Christians, whatever, they base their faith on these quote unquote godly people. And if these godly people mess up, then that ultimately is the justification that they use in order for them to give up on their faith. But you shouldn't base your faith on a person. You should base your faith on Jesus. So that's the mistake that she's making. And that's the mistake that I feel like a lot of people are making as well. And I want to bring you to Psalms 145, verses 17 through 18. And it says, "The Lord is righteous in everything he does. He is filled with kindness. The Lord is close to all who call him." So when you're going through these struggles, when you're going through these hard times, when you're feeling like people in the congregation of your church are judging you, your friends, your family are judging you, and they're trying to use, religion in order to make you feel bad. When you're going through these different experiences, because you're going to most likely go through it, it's important that you take that information to God, and that you don't just take it to your church. You don't just take it to your pastor. You don't just take it to your friends. You don't take it to your family, but you actually take those concerns to God and let God work it out inside of you, because there might be some truth in what they're saying to you. Like I said, they might be able to see the calling that God has put inside of you. They might be able to see your gifts before you're able to even identify them, and they're calling you to be greater. Or on the flip side, it might just be a toxic environment, and you might be, called to leave that church and find a new church. But what I'm trying to say is don't base your faith on the church, so to say, but base your faith on Jesus. Seek Jesus. Ask him to direct your steps. Seek him in everything that you do so that he can direct your steps. Because otherwise you're going to end up falling into this trap that many people do, where they end up falling away from the faith because of a bad experience that they had at their church. And it's sad, because I think it is clear that God had a calling on Demi's life. He gave her a talent. He gave her a gift of music, a gift to be able to touch people in a certain way through her music, through her voice. And, when she was talking about, she said, I'm going to hell because it feels like heaven. It's really sad, because I was going to say, I just pray that she could turn it around and that she could use this gift in order to glorify the kingdom. But at this point, I think it might be too late at this point. Just based on what I'm seeing, I just don't know if she's going to be able to turn it around. I think the demons are too prevalent in her spirit, and they're overcoming her to an extent where I don't know if she's going to be able to turn away from that darkness and enter into the light. Let me know what y'all think. Subscribe, drop a comment. Let me know what y'all think. All right. I'm out.